I'll just double check my actual disk space. I don't think it should because I think there's like a terabyte drive in this bad boy.
That seems adequate. Unless you got miles of porn on there.
I can guarantee you this one does not have miles of porn on it.
He's got everything. He's got midget porn. He's got goat porn. He's got...
My question is, since when did we start measuring porn quantities in distance instead of like volume or weight?
It's actually usually measured in metric thrust, I think. Welcome back to I'll See Myself Out. My name's Norm Reynolds.
I'm Ryan Patel.
I'm Terry.
And I'm Dan Lee Shaw.
These will be your only warnings.
There will be foul language.
There will be spoilers.
And there's going to be foul language. Hey, Norm.
Hey, Dan.
Why was the robot angry?
I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you at the end of the podcast.
This time on the podcast, we're talking about the 2018 film adaptation of the science fiction novel Mortal Engines, starring Hera Hilmar playing Hester Shaw, Robert Sheehan playing Tom Natsworthy, Hugo Weaving playing Thaddeus Valentine, Stephen Lang playing Shrike, the resurrected stalker, and Ji-Hai Kim playing Anna Fang. So let's talk about what this film is about. Let's kind of break it down. The IMDb synopsis, in particular, is that in a post-apocalyptic world where cities move and consume each other to survive, two strangers come together to stop a sinister and destructive conspiracy. Which sounds great when you put it in those terms, until you try to unravel everything that's actually happening in this movie, in which case, that's pretty fucking vague. I don't know how you guys would describe this movie. I don't know if I would describe it in exactly those terms.
Well, I did a quick Google search on it, and the synopsis I got from Google was a single father tries to fight off raiders using only his wits and ancient tools to keep his town safe and fed, while attempting to make it to a hidden oasis of abundance that is being guarded by his bitterly estranged daughter.
That's so weird. Google's so accurate.
Yeah, it was actually penned by Terrence Barents.
Renowned movie reviewer.
Yeah.
This movie had a lot of things that were really sad about it.
So on that note, I'm going to be a problem tonight, guys. I can feel it already. A bigger problem than usual.
That's good. That's more entertaining that way.
Let's use this as one last opportunity before we go deeper into the movie to tell the audience that at this point forward, there's definitely going to be more spoilers and more discussion of the movie than they're going to want to hear if they haven't watched it yet, or unless they don't care.
Yeah, if you haven't watched the movie yet, pause and never come back.
I mean, they could come back and talk about it. I mean, I don't think we're that bad, but it's just, if you don't want any unpleasant surprises, now's the time to stop and go watch it on your own.
So I thought when I put this on, I had no expectations as to what this movie was going to be. And I had a real moment lying in my bed watching this movie. Becca was sleeping beside me, and I said out loud, I'm like, what the fuck am I watching right now? Like, I already went in with like some pretty strange notions as to what this could be. And then when I saw a city rip itself apart and start driving in random directions, I was like, I don't know what's going on right now, but I'm in. Like, I was also in. I'm like, okay, you got my attention. I just saw Starbucks drive into the sunset, so let's buckle up.
When you started watching this movie, did your first thought go, who the hell thought it was a good idea to put a city on wheels?
Just thinking about it from a construction standpoint, the amount of preparation to move a house from point A to point B, it's like you have to be so careful, and shit is still going to fall out of whack.
This is a good point to kind of mention that this is a film with a story based on a series of novels, and that the adaptation from novel to film leaves out just such a ridiculous breadth of information that there's so much that would make more sense in this movie if they took just an extra few minutes to explain what had happened and why it happened.
Why is everything on wheels? Everything's on fucking wheels.
Well, that's it, right? It happens so fast, but the opening sequence of the movie actually starts inside of the Universal Studios like opening credit sequence where they always show the Earth from orbit and they have the giant Universal letters floating over. And in that sequence, they edit it and they detail it so it looks like it's like atmospheric explosions and the continents being lit on fire and stuff like that. It doesn't make any fucking sense because the concept is cool, but the reason why is absolutely ridiculous. And there's a lot of other questions that come out of that.
I don't know about you, but as I was watching this movie, I couldn't help but wonder when I was going to start seeing the Hot Wheels track pop up. And like that like super coaster. I wanted to see London just fucking go down that double loop-de-loop. That would just be like epic.
The simple fact that they were moving an entire city, a mountain of metal, to go acquire resources to fuel the moving, like it was stupid on its face, where you could just send out somebody to go get resources and bring it back to the city, which would be a much better conservation of energy. And then if something were to happen and the continents start shifting, then you fire up the engines and let's move, 200 miles that way.
On that note, in the books, they kind of address that where it's less about the big city moving, and they have suburbs that actually drive around and acquire resources mostly.
Okay, that makes more sense.
So I feel like based on a lot of the things that I've kind of read about the book series in general, this probably would have made a much better like mini-series than a movie. It was really made before the era of miniseries. So I feel like if they just held on to it a little longer, they might have thought, let's make this better.
Well, that's a good point, Norm. And some of the backstory based on how this film was produced and the story that led up to the making of this movie is a pretty rough story. They had tons of time to plan this movie and to plan this a lot better. In my opinion, I found that even though it looks great, there's a lot of sloppy shit. There's a lot of sloppy work put into this thing. And for me, it left a lot more questions and a lot more wanting, which is why I did so much research to try and understand some of the elements of it.
Like, speaking of sloppy shit, there was a moment when they're in the Sky Bunker, Sky City. As soon as they get on there, it says no fire and no electronic devices. And then the first thing I see is light and lanterns. I'm like, what? Did you fill them with fireflies? Like, where are you getting the light from?
This is also a world where they drive around on cities on wheels.
Rules are meant to be broken, I guess.
Maybe it was more like, they have like specialized controlled flames for those torches. No, you know what I mean? Like, you go to a gas station, like, don't use any electronic devices, but they have an intercom right next to it. There's safety in line to make sure that things they install in the station are compatible and they're safe. Some asshole coming on being like, "Oh, what's up, fuckers?" Smoking a cigarette.
Fair enough.
Is that how you fill your gas, Norm?
Yeah.
The big fucking stogie hanging out of his mouth.
My counter to that is that gas stations aren't in the sky. Something were to go wrong. One lantern and the lights aren't being contained by paper.
Well, to your point, Dan, what's interesting about that when you think about the story in this film is like they refer to old tech as sort of like the technology and the inventions of what would be like modern time now. And you would think that if they built a city that is essentially a giant fucking blimp, that in their research looking back into things, they would have thought the Hindenburg is well remembered. Maybe that's something we should look into, because the setting, as far as I remember the dialogue in the story going, paints the picture that it's like been 1,000 years since modern times. So
I'm sorry to cut you off, but is this happening at the exact same time as Battlefield Earth?
Oh my god.
This is a prequel, isn't it?
welcome back to I'll See Myself Out. Today we're covering Battlefield Earth again. I have a question for the room right now. And my question is, did anybody have high expectations for this movie?
I had mixed expectations. I had high expectations, but I saw that the reviews were mostly like 6.5 out of 10. Yeah, but I was kind of in Dan's boat where I didn't really know what I was expecting either. I knew it was like based on novels for young adults or teens. And so I was kind of expecting something with kind of like a Twilight vibe. I was expecting a different type of theme, I guess.
My expectations for this movie was like a roller coaster for the first half an hour. When it first started, I had zero expectations. My expectations went back up when I saw Hugo Weaving, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, he's played so many amazing characters in movies like for the last 3 decades. You imagine he wouldn't be in a bad project.
I actually enjoyed it for what it was worth, right? It made me laugh just because of the ridiculousness of it.
My issue with this whole thing is that they're looking for resources, right? They had a machine that was capable of creating an antimatter cannon and scientists that were smart enough to put it all together. And that's a massive amount of energy. Maybe I don't know, like redirect it into powering everything. You're basically set for life with something like that.
To kind of further that, like, where were they drawing the energy from for those blasts?
Right? What a waste.
Not only that, but can we also talk about how after everything was said and done, even though they killed like so many people on the shield wall, the Shangguinese people just like said, yeah, you could have just asked, come on in. We still like you. All of that was unnecessary to the highest extent, even after it all happened.
Yeah, I think their biggest concern was somebody trying to take the wall down, but if you just walk up, heel toe it.
Could have knocked.
It's like when you show up at your neighbor's house, you could take a taxi, you could take like, I don't know, an Abrams tank.
Yeah.
You're sending the message, right?
It's like show up at the door, holding a cup of coffee or holding a chainsaw. Probably going to open the door for one and not the other.
let's talk about what the best parts of this movie were. What do you guys think were the best aspects of the movie? Like, it could be things about the movie, or it could be actual parts of the story itself. I should say that I hated the whole movie, because I really didn't. In the most dad-like tone possible, I actually just found that the movie disappointed me. There were things about this movie that I really enjoyed. And there were a lot of elements about this movie, about the story, and about the characters that I think, if done differently, would have been really great. And I think that this movie had a lot of potential. A big part of it that did fall short for me was definitely not enough detail in the story, not enough explanation of things. And otherwise, I mean, I didn't really have any problems with any of the performances. The things that I really enjoyed, special effects were pretty amazing. There wasn't anything in this movie that really took me out of it. Generally speaking, the film looked really great. I liked the idea behind a lot of the action sequences. I thought they also looked really cool. And I liked the overall idea behind the story. So I think that was the stuff that I really enjoyed about the movie. And I want to say that for me as well, my favorite performance in the film, and this should be no surprise, was definitely Hugo Weaving. And that should be no surprise, because Hugo Weaving is just an absolute fucking legend.
For me, it was hands down the visuals and the cinematic sequences. I would actually go so far as to say that as far as what a movie should do, it did for me. Like, while I was watching it, I forgot about my problems. I forgot what time it was. Like, nothing else mattered. I was fully engaged. I was a pretty big fan of all of the airship fights, or the mountain chasing the small town. And when Tom was chasing Hester through the town as it was being cut up, I really dug that. But so the cinematic scenes, I really loved the coloring. It looked so pretty. The things that I didn't like were minor compared to the things that I did like.
I enjoyed the movie. Like, the visuals were probably my favorite again, but Hugo Weaving is what I enjoyed about the movie the most. And then again, when you get into the complete machine of the city, I thought was really kind of a cool idea and a cool concept, and how much thought they put into actually mechanizing and visualizing what a city like that would need to actually run. I enjoyed just having that 2 hours to just enjoy what was in front of me.
This is high praise.
I can respect that, Terry. I should also preface and say that I see eye to eye with you on enjoying the movie for what it is. I think that, unfortunately, I went into it with maybe higher expectations for something I thought it was going to be. Because if I were looking at this film sort of in like my archetype of like, watch a movie for entertainment and don't nitpick about it, would be Transformers. Which also, strange link to this comment, Hugo Weaving actually voices Megatron in all the live action Transformers movies, which I didn't realize. But I just mean in the sense of just enjoying something for its action, for its visual, for its entertainment value.
That's going to lead me into my next point, where my favorite villains are ones that you can relate to. My favorite type of storytelling is when you have characters that are bad, but then you start off hating them, but then you like them, and then characters that you like that you end up hating.
I think what you're referring to, which is something I also really appreciate in films, is when they give villains sort of depth of character by actually giving them some humanity. Even if it's obscure and it's like morally incorrect and it's corrupted logic, there's usually a reason why villains are villainous, right? And it makes you appreciate the depth of their character. And so things like that make you appreciate the depth of writing in a story. And that's kind of also, unfortunately, another thing that I didn't find as much of in this story.
I was just say, like, any of it would have been nice if any of the characters had depth beyond like their kind of archetype. Like, every character had what they were, and there was no dynamics to it.
I think human psyche plays into it as well. So if you have all of these characters that are playing their parts and they don't waver, it creates an air of stagnance. There's an element to this that isn't changing. And not only is it not engaging, but it's also...
like, it doesn't feel authentic?
Yeah. And I think a properly written story and a properly executed script will allow you to feel connected to every single character that's in there.
Another thing that stands out to me was that they have this, like, the most extreme and the most gangster character and the most complex character in the movie is Shrike, who's plays like the resurrected stalker from, that's, I don't know how many hundreds of years old, but it's supposed to be like an immortal relic, resurrected machine body, human hunter army badass guy who's like
From the Lazarus Company or something?
yeah, from some famous brigade that was like murdering the shit out of people during a war 1,000 years ago, and like they cut him out of the film halfway through. And when you read about what his character is supposed to be like in the novel, they literally have said, even on like the wiki pages that cover the fandom and everything like that, that his character gets like run over by cities and shot with cannon shells and he survives. But for some reason on that flotilla airship city thing, fucking Anna Fang hits him with her boot knife and he fucking goes down. So like I'm super confused about how they've decided to portray these characters. Sorry, obviously you can tell I'm kind of heated about it, but like I like cool shit. And like I'm sorry, but that chick's boot knife isn't cooler than a fucking robot that for whatever reason hunts people down for like hundreds of miles in any direction and can't really die. It's so bizarre to me. There's so many choices that just didn't add up to me there. So that was another missed opportunity for me. There's definitely there was some things lacking with the film, and there was some stuff that probably would have made the characters a lot richer. I mean, I know that I'm nitpicking, but even if we're talking about Shrike's character, I know in the novel series, I don't think Shrike's character is supposed to show up until they're already on the Air City. So imagine watching the movie and out of nowhere you think everything's fine because Tom and Hester have just been rescued from cannibals, and then all of a sudden this psychotic fucking robot shows up out of nowhere and starts tearing everybody's asses apart. I mean, that would have been a way cooler introduction. That would have been some Terminator shit.
Holy shit.
And did you not think about for a second how the hell he was tracking Hester? Like how he was always showing up everywhere she was. Like she had some sort of like beacon on her.
He's the future Reverend, okay? That's all we know.
Jesus Christ.
Much more efficient.
For those of you who are listening, that's a throwback to our last episode where we covered Brimstone. So if you want to check that out, that's also available on our podcast list.
I really did like this movie too. At no point when I was watching it did I feel like I needed to continue watching it just so we can do this podcast. I enjoyed 99.9% of it, save for a couple of scenes. But I loved the graphics. I love the acting and the set design. Like when they're inside the like the crevices of the tracks, like the deep tracks laid by the cities, that looked great. I'd wondered how much of that was CGI and how much of it was actual set design.
Let's talk about the worst aspects of this movie and what we would do to make this movie better. Let's start with Norm.
For me, 100%, the worst part was the character development as well as the plot development and the important background information not being put out there. I think probably the only way to reasonably fix that is to make a classic Peter Jackson trilogy out of it. But in actuality, though, I think it would have made a TV series done cinematically, movie style, but just spread over 10 episodes. And I think they could have really done a lot with it. I think they probably could have pulled a few seasons and done the rest of the books. The concept of it is great. It's enjoyable to watch. I think that it's just a missed mark on the choice of delivery.
I agree with that. And I think I can't agree with that more, actually. And one thing that I think, if I could point out, something that I was expecting a lot more of, that to me was actually probably the most attractive quality looking forward to seeing the movie itself, was I expected there to be a lot more car chases. I expected there to be a lot more like car themed action. There's very little of that. There's actually really in the opening sequence might be the only part where there's that much vehicle to vehicle combat, not including the airships later on. But if we're talking about a story that is largely centered around the cool factor of having giant cities fight each other, I want to see a lot more cities fighting each other. I don't think I'm being picky when I say that. If the central point of this story, and if you're diving further into what the novels are about, in the narrative, the way that the author wrote the stories, London isn't the only predator city. There's actually a number of them. So it would have been really cool if part of the original story that got included was London going head to head with another city before trying to destroy the shield wall. That would have been really cool. I would have really liked to see even what that would look like from a different perspective, because we saw in the opening sequence of the film that there were these small towns trying to run away. But I'd love to see what it looks like when a bunch of smaller traction cities, as they're called, were to fight each other, what it would look like. Would it look like ship battles at sea? Would there be people swinging from like one car to the other on ropes? Would there be like Pirates of the Caribbean action sequence, basically? I mean, that would be pretty fucking badass. But again, that's something that I would have liked to see. I think that would have added a lot to the cool factor. And if they took something like that and stretched it into either a longer series or even like a made for Netflix miniseries or something like that. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, I think it would have also been like more to that point. It would have been really neat to see like a Megazord kind of thing, like all of the traction cities kind of getting together to take on a predator city, and you see them kind of like, oh, they just all happen to use some kind of universal connecting.
See, I think what could have made the movie better was if we took Kevin Costner, made it on water.
See yourself out.
Waterworld is also on Netflix Canada streaming currently, so
I'm about it.
yeah, so am I.
Can we?
Oh fuck, is that going to be the next
I
one?
am all about it. Yes.
Oh guys, are we doing Waterworld next?
Yes.
Yes.
Ooh.
I've wanted to for a long time.
Let's do it. It's fucking happening.
We already made reference to Waterworld, didn't we?
Yeah, we have, but pissing in the coffee filter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there anything you didn't like, Terry, and like how would you improve the film?
There was a few things I didn't like, but my opinion on what I didn't like about the movie was that there was the problem with the character development. The backstories were not there. But to me, I enjoyed it, so I really wouldn't. There's not much I would improve upon it other than having more of the backstories, more of Shrike, as his name is, more of Shrike character understanding who he is. Beyond that, I enjoyed it, so there's not much more I could say to improve because everything else was just good.
I think I agree with that. If you had a little bit more of like a Pacific Rim big kind of monster battle, like a big bruiser technology element to the film that I think everybody was really hoping for, I definitely think that would have been an improvement. And I think that's something that people would have flocked to cinemas more to see, because the prime example of something like that would be Pacific Rim. And if the Pacific Rim numbers in cinema can tell you anything, it's that the allure of robots beating up monsters or other robots is still as alluring as it was when we were fucking 5 years old. It's alive and well.
Robots are awesome, and when robots fight robots, it's even more awesome. And then if you can pit them against a giant monster creature, hey Christ, that's this like gold.
This movie had the potential of being the big budget scale version of those robot tech lab RC car fights that you see late at night on like Discovery Channel.
BattleBots?
Yes! This had so much potential.
The visual Terry gave when he was talking about what he would improve with Shrike's backstory made me like anticipate in the uncut version of this, they kind of start talking about Shrike a little bit and then play the entire Brimstone movie. But at the very end, where he falls out of the window, it cuts to the scene from Revenge of the Sith, where Anakin becomes Darth Vader.
Yes.
He's like being pressed together, except he comes out as Shrike.
And his eyes glow green.
I also could have done with fewer shitty one-liners from the badass mercenaries.
But that was her entire character.
Norm, don't justify it. Her character tried to be so cool to the point that it pissed me off. It's like it was worse than like the high school portrayal of like a cool kid. It was like so abrasive. Let's just talk about to the audience. Let's tell them whether or not we'd recommend this movie.
Yeah, I would recommend this movie. It was a fun watch. I don't put it high on your list, but if you got nothing to do for a couple hours, I wouldn't find it a waste of time.
I would recommend this movie. I think it was a lot of fun. 2 hours well spent, but don't expect your life to be changed, and I don't expect it to make the list of movies that you'd want to watch again in the future. But you got a Saturday night and there's nothing else to watch, it's pretty good. Regardless of all of the shit that we just talked about this movie, it's definitely worth watching.
I would definitely recommend this movie much in the same light that Dan and Norm have recommended the movie. I wouldn't go into it with high expectations. I think it had a lot of potential to be something really cool, something really gritty, a lot more interesting, a lot more adult and dark and sci-fi than it turned out being, with a lot more depth of character and a lot better of a story. I don't think that the film does the novels justice based on what I know, but regardless of the negatives we outlined, there was a lot of cool stuff in this movie, and I think that for what it brings to the screen in originality and for what the actors and the production department managed to pull off in terms of a visually interesting movie as well, it's definitely worth sitting down and watching, at least just to experience once.
If you're like me and who have pretty much finished Netflix, this is definitely worth a watch. It's one of those movies that you kind of have to go into it with no expectations other than you want to watch a movie. It is what it is, and accept it and enjoy it. It's a beautiful movie. I'm going to give this 8 Sunbeam toasters out of 10 Harrelsons.
I'm going to give this movie 6 out of 10 boot knives to the chest.
I give this a 7 out of a possible 10 green-eyed murderbots.
I'm going to go ahead and give it 7 out of 10 feeder towns being consumed by a giant apex predator town.
It's oddly specific.
Are all of these oddly specific?
That one's really specific. That's next level specific.
Thank you for joining us today for another episode of I'll See Myself Out.
If you enjoyed our review today and you have not seen Mortal Engines yet, you can catch Mortal Engines on Netflix Canada, streaming now in February of 2021.
Join the discussion by telling us what you thought about the movie in the comments. And if you're listening to us on a service that doesn't allow comments, well, I guess that's sad. Don't worry about it.
If you're digging the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode, which, by the way, is going to be the critically acclaimed motion picture starring one and only Kevin Costner named Waterworld.
So, Norm, why was the robot angry?
Because he had to wait like an hour to hear the joke.
Because someone kept pushing his buttons. I'll see myself out.
Yeah.